XAM, Abel, King Nazaru, Neo Game Spark, Danny's E-World, Fire Fist Shikamaru, and 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 many more, many more. Several years later, Payback was and always will be a motherfucking bitch. Spider-Man is and always will be back in the MCU. That means the Amazing Spider-Man film franchise is and forever is no more. This is the intro to several video responses. Amazing Spider-Man video responses relayed to you. Like I said, this was retaliation from Dragon Ball Evolution. If I couldn't have Dragon Ball Reborn, you cannot have the Amazing Spider-Man. And while the other Spider-Man protesters are finished, this protester isn't. Once again, thank you everyone. Thank you everyone who protested, bashed, ranted on, and boycotted this movie and brought it home where it belongs, to the MCU. Thank you for helping me even the score up with this Dragon Ball protest trash and fake ass Spider-Man trash and Sony Amazing Spider-Man film Andrew Garfield trash. I will never stop thanking you. There will be several thank you videos to everyone who made this possible, for showing me that no matter how popular something is, if you're passionate about something and you protested it, if you can make enough noise and you can be loud enough, you can make some noise and stop this said movie. And we stopped the Amazing Spider-Man and brought him home to Marvel where he belongs. Thank you for that, everyone. Now, like I said, Abel, King Nazaru, Spider-Man coming back. Abel, King Nazaru, Danny's D-World, XAM, Neo Game Spark, Fire Fist Shikamaru, Spider-Man returning home to the MCU. The Amazing Spider-Man coming home to the MCU and the Amazing Spider-Man films being canceled is my all-time favorite form of vengeance against you, because it exposed you for the dumbass, sheep, and hypocrites you were. You had no business near this movie, let alone supporting and defending it. But like I said, I like raining on Spider-Man the most. That's my favorite form of vengeance against you. But this feud, this war started because of Dragon Ball Evolution, and Naruto. So we will finish with Dragon Ball Evolution and Naruto. So yes, this is the remade intro to several video responses to you, and we're also going to do other franchises like Ninja Turtles, because I got a huge problem with that fan base, which you're part of. Ninja Turtles, the DCU, we're going to defend the DCEU, and we're going to defend Dragon Ball Evolution, and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man series again. So with that being said, let's hit my music, and I'm gonna make my great entrance. I'm gonna show you guys what I'm made of. One last time, one last fight against the protesters. To quote Ocean Dub T and Shinhan, this four-eyed cowboy and this Spider-Man protester and Dragon Ball Evolution supporter is going for one last ride. Let's get this started now. Waited forever for this. looking for. Ooh, you get it. Yeah. It's time.
Alright, Abel, King Nazaru, we're going to start out with you at number one. We're going to talk about the failure of the Amazing Spider-Man films, how they returned to the MCU, and the two recent MCU films, Homecoming and Far From Home. Back when the Amazing Spider-Man films were out back in 2012 through 2015 and 16 respectively, each of you, Abel, King Nazaru, Danny's D World, most of you were running around as your last attempts to defend these sorry excuse for Spider-Man films, that were the Amazing Spider-Man films. You tried to use the excuse that, oh, well, Marvel and Disney, because of what they were doing to Spider-Man in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoons and in the various comic books like Superior Spider-Man, that they would do more harm, more damage to Spider-Man than Sony already did. Once again, now we're here several years later. What was all that you were saying? What was all that you were saying about Sony, about Marvel and Disney doing worse? No. As soon as Sam Raimi was done, this is what should have happened. Spider-Man should have returned home to the MCU the first time. Those two amazing Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies should not have happened and were a colossal waste of time. And I need you two to never, ever pull a scene like that again. Your Amazing Spider-Man films suck, despite all that build-up, all that hype in the media. They still couldn't outshine or outgross the Sam Raimi trilogy. They damn sure couldn't outshine or outgross the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You don't have to like the MCU. Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't need you as its fans. But never, ever try to bash or discredit the MCU to prop up these films. The Amazing Spider-Man's Part 1 and 2. These films were, as I'm going to get to later in this list, were terrible, inaccurate to the comic books, and a colossal waste of everyone's time. Everything bad about cinema, everything bad about the Hollywood scene today was the Amazing Spider-Man's Part 1 and 2. So yeah, never ever do that again. And if any of you ever reply to me with that whole, well, MCU Spider-Man is Iron Man Jr. Andrew Garfield was Peter Cullen, discount Robert Downey Jr. and discount lame wannabe Christian Bale. Batman Begins. Then the entire Amazing Spider-Man films were a colossal ripoff of a horror film from the 70s called Zap, Batman 89, and begins with the whole wanting to spray gas over the city. That was also in Batman Forever, except in Forever it was acid. Then the Lizard's plan to turn everyone into lizards was from a horror movie called Zap, a 70s horror movie called Zap, and the tone, including this super realistic tone, is obviously, the tone and the filming style is obviously not only inspired by Batman Begins, but is a colossal ripoff of Twilight. They even had Twilight inspired acting, except this was somehow even worse. The acting in this film was somehow even worse than Twilight. Then the second one, when all those franchises I just mentioned, when all those franchises stopped being popular, they tried to immediately jump on the MCU, the MCU bandwagon, and failed miserably. So yeah, once again, never create a scene like that again. Number two, like I've said before, inaccurate to the comic books. Inaccurate to the comic books. Now, this probably should have been much lower on the list, but I put it here because being inaccurate to the comic books. The Sam Raimi version was 60% close. There's a big 40% difference. If Sam Raimi is 60%, the Amazing Spider-Man should be 80 and 90%. I hate it when reboots do this. They diverged even further away from the comic books, further away from the comic books, and unlike other series that didn't follow their source material, their version was neither better, good, or equal to. It was the worst incarnation and the worst version of every Spider-Man character, every Spider-Man character, mythos, and element that was featured in this movie. It was the worst version ever. The worst Green Goblin, the worst Norman and Harry Osborn, the worst Gwen Stacy, the worst Electro, Rhino, Lizard, and Aunt May. Everything was bad. Nothing was good, and nothing was accurate, with the exception of the web shooters, and Andrew Garfield happens to resemble the ultimate version of Spider-Man, and several other comic book elements, but with several other scenes from the comic book, but with completely different plots from their comic book. Which brings me to number three. This should have probably been number two. Terrible script, terrible storyline, GameCube level special effects, terrible acting, dialogue, and cringe-worthy jokes. You do not need to be a comic book fan to know how bad this film was, to see the terrible, atrocious acting, where the atrocious, unenthusiastic Twilight-inspired acting, and it's somehow even worse than Twilight did in the second one, with them constantly, with not only the same cringe-worthy dialogue from the first one, the cringe-worthy Twilight-inspired acting, bland acting from the first one, but worse, them constantly repeating their lines over and over again, saying crap like, that's a question. I don't know. I break up with you. Spider-Man or Spider-Woman? We don't know. Cringeworthy lines like that. Laundry Sheriff. Cringeworthy stuff like that. And then something about your unibrow. Stuff, garbage stuff like that. There's more stuff like that. GameCube effects. Classic films like Star Wars from the 70s and 80s. Mortal Kombat from 95, and even Dragon Ball Evolution were made with much less money, but look more realistic and more real than this super fake, try hard wannabe comic book movie. So yeah, GameCube level effects, and like I said, the worst script possible. Both of these movies suck. Stop saying the first one was good, and the second one sucks. Both of these sucks. The only difference between the first and second one is the first one only had one plot, one extremely boring plot, and a parent subplot, and a Sinister Six setup that has nothing to do with anything in that film, and it's just there to set up other films. Then you have the second one. Which has almost really no main plot, just a bunch of subplots just a bunch of subplots that really go nowhere. That really go nowhere. Do I really have to talk about those again? I will. You got the horrible bastardized Harry Osborn, Peter Parker relationship, the bastardization of the goblins. Harry Osborn was never Goblin before Norman. Harry Osborn does not kill Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy is never been involved with Peter Parker's adventures or fights, and Gwen Stacy does not beat or kill Electro. Never even encountered Electro in the comic book. She didn't even know Spider-Man's identity. She never had anything to do with his adventures. And for those of you like to say, well, Gwen Stacy was more useful in this film. No, she was more useful in this film when they captured her character. No, they didn't. She was an overpowered Marisu. She was more of a hero than Spider-Man was. She was more useful than Spider-Man was. And then for all this girl power, for all this trying to make Gwen Stacy more relevant to the story, they made her even more relevant. Her whole purpose was just to be Peter Parker's girlfriend, then die and set up the next lead, which of course would be Mary Jane. They created an even more useless and irrelevant character. The original Gwen Stacy was not a fighter, was not involved with Peter Parker's adventures, but she was a rival to Mary Jane, and she had her own life and her own problems. So talk about missing the point of a comic book, man. Missing the point of a comic book. And speaking of missing the point of a comic book character, Peter Parker, Andrew Garfield has and never will be Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Just a cocky show-off, asshole, hipster, try-hard, edgelord. Everything he did in this film was try-hard. I like to call Andrew Garfield the amazing try-hard man, the amazing cringe man. Everything he did was try-hard. They try to give you the parent stuff to make you feel sorry for him. When there's nothing to respect, and there's nothing to respect, he sucks at everything. He sucks at fighting. Couldn't beat villains without Gwen Stacy's help. Says makes cringeworthy jokes, and other dumb stuff like Peter Parker appearing in that guy's car without him knowing. Like I said, just retarded stuff. Oh yeah, and the cringeworthy basketball scene where there's number one, he managed to jump from one side of the court to the other and dunk a basketball. Basketball players on television can't do that. You can't do that unless you have springs in your boots. He was able to jump from the other side like they did in Space Jam, the original Space Jam from '95. Then he broke the goalpost, and you're trying to tell me that nobody knows he's Spider-Man? Nobody knows he's Spider-Man. There are multiple moments where he's showing off, has his property of Peter Parker on his camera, Like I said, just dumb shit. There was nothing good about these movies. So yeah, movies were absolutely terrible. Then one of my main reasons for going into these films was the Rhino. Guess what? You can take Rhino, Paul Giamatti, you can take him out of this film, and the film would not be any different. Not only would not be any different, you would have had a much better film. So and one thing I notice now, as much as I hate both Amazing Spider-Man movies, the Amazing Spider-Man 2012, as terrible and boring as it was, on its own it is okay. I don't do okay. This is the age of the MCU. This is the greatest movie era, the 2010s, now the 2020s. The greatest movies eras. You make the best movie possible. 90s, I like that time period, but that was a time period where standards were low, and none of these movies that I liked were considered good. Only a few movies from that era were considered good. 2000s was a much better era. We were getting there, but we still weren't there yet. And now, finally, we are here. So I do not accept okay, man, average, unless that's your best, and that wasn't your best. Your best. And then the Amazing Spider-Man 2012 would be okay if it wasn't for its sequel, which undoes and makes the first one even more lame. So once again, there was nothing good about these movies. For, as always, you know it. This, of course, is payback this is payback for Dragon Ball Evolution, the Green Lantern, and the MCU. Now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, unlike DBE and Green Lantern 2011, they don't need me to defend them. But like I said, I hate it when the Avengers 2012 dropped in theaters, when it was kicking so much butt. It was the newest and most exciting thing. We had these lame. There were two types of people. The other ones were the Nolan people who couldn't accept the fact that that type of filming and that film series was over, and nobody wanted to see that style of filming anymore. Then we have the even more annoying Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man people. People who, these people were even more annoying than the Nolan people, because these Amazing Spider-Man film fans, in order to prop up their film, they try to do everything in their power to put down the MCU, trying to find flaws in the MCU. And it's not, they have their own opinion. You have your own reasons. You have your own opinion. If you hate the MCU, that's your opinion. But do not try and discredit the MCU. To prop up the Amazing Spider-Mans, the worst films ever. And you did this because each of you were mad and you were jealous that the Amazing Spider-Man's Part 1 and 2 will never have what the MCU have, even with all the hype, money, and everything it had going for, everything thrown at it. It still couldn't make more. Both movies still couldn't manage more than $700 million, and combined couldn't make more than $1,400 million. So like I said, atrocious. And like I said, with Dragon Ball Evolution and Green Lantern, if I couldn't have the follow-up and sequel to those movies, no Spider-Man. That's how I play. Abel, you said something about this is what a dictator or a foreign country. I don't remember what you said, but whatever that was, I don't know what that was. But for me, this is not only payback. This is payback. This is vengeance. This is justice. This is justice, and this is fair. This is fairness. And last but not least, more importantly, Dragon Ball Evolution and Green Lantern and MCU aside, no more corporate cash-ins on franchises. No more of those. We are in the good movies era. We are in the great movies era. No more corporate cash-ins. The best movies possible. The Dark Knight, X-Men First Class, and Days of Future Past were bad enough, and this one, The Amazing Spider-Man Part 1 and 2, was even worse than both of those movies. So once again, stop with the bullshit and stop trying to bring up DBE and various movies from 10 plus and 20 plus years ago, like Batman and Robin. The standard and the bar has been set much higher than those. So yeah. Oh yeah, number 5. Actually, this is one of my first reasons for hating the film. Number 1, not in the MCU. The Amazing Spider-Man's Part 1 and 2 were not in the MCU. So for me, they already suck. If you're not there's no reason Spider-Man should not have been in the Marvel Cinematic Universe right away. And if you're not going to feature him in the MCU, you better do something big. You better do something bigger and badder than the MCU. There is no possible way to be bigger and badder than the MCU. So once again, MCU. Then, not the cartoons or comics I grew up with. I grew up with the 90s, 60s, 70s, and 80s Spider-Man, followed by the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. And it's none of those. Actually, there is some Sam Raimi in here. Everything terrible, everything bad about the Sam Raimi was these movies. None of the good stuff from those movies. Number 8 goes back to number 2 and accurate to the comic book, except this is the characters. Andrew Garfield and the characters suck. Everyone Everyone except for Captain Stacy. Everyone except for Captain Stacy sucks. And every actor and actress sucks. With Andrew Garfield being the worst superhero actor and the worst actor of all time. Seriously, he was horrible. With everyone else, they were just either miscast or just horribly directed. The only two good actors in this franchise were Dennis Leary as Captain Stacy. He should have been the main character of the first film. His storyline, his character was made more interesting than everything. That does not save it. I do not go to a Spider-Man film to see Captain Stacy. Then you got part two with Jamie Foxx's. His Electro character sucked, but his performance was actually okay. But the character was so damn bad. Yeah. And Gwen Stacy, she was, like I said earlier, she was just an overpowered Mari Sue. Emma Stone was a great actress, but the way she was written in her character, Gwen Stacy sucks. She was an overpowered Mari Sue, useless Mari Sue at that. She was even worse than Mary Jane, Kirsten Dunst's Mary Jane from Spider-Man 1 through 3, the Sam Raimi trilogy. And last but not least, the biggest and most offensive things. This film had the audacity to take the Spider-Man film, cram it with fan bait and fan service, like Trilby said, and just threw some random shit together to keep the rights instead of defaulting back to Marvel. That right there is one of the most offensive things you can do. You have setups for other movies, spin-offs, and other movies that are not going to happen now. Terrible movies like Dragon Ball Evolution, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, Green Lantern 2011, TMNT 2014, Judge Dredd, and many more. All of these movies, they had Easter eggs, and they had small Easter eggs and plans for future films. Each of those films knew to focus on your first film first and leave the other set pieces, the other storylines for your follow-ups, for your sequels. These people have the audacity to set up those films in these two crappy films first, but the setups have nothing to do with the main plot of either of these films. So that is the biggest reason that they suck, and that is the biggest reason that they fail. Once again, Abel and King Nazaru, I think you guys have learned, because I don't see you guys around anymore. I still see dumbass Amazing Spider-Man, Sony, Andrew Garfield fans, but I do not see you guys around. I think you learned the lesson, but do not ever create a scene like that again. Alright, XAM, Fire Fist Shikamaru, it's your turn. Alright, Fire Fist Shikamaru, XAM, it's your turn. Number one reason for protesting The Amazing Spider-Man. Number one is always payback for Dragon Ball Evolution and Green Lantern 2011. If I can't have Dragon Ball Reborn and Green Lantern 2, the sequels to Dragon Ball Evolution and Green Lantern 2, you cannot have Spider-Man. You cannot have Spider-Man. That's how I play. So I'm protesting and bashing yours. And Dragon Ball Evolution and Green Lantern aside, like I told Abel and King Nazaru, The Dark Knight, X-Men First Class, and Days of Future Past were bad enough. We did not need an even worse Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. And Amazing Spider-Man is worse than all of those, because not only was that not a good adaptation, that wasn't even a good movie. So once again, as always, you weren't fair with Dragon Ball Evolution and Green Lantern 2011. I'm not fair with The Amazing Spider-Man. Number two, inaccurate to the comic books. inaccurate to the comic books and not the cartoons and comic books I grew up with. So yeah, don't try to pull that multiple universe thing. It wasn't based upon the comic books that you were supposed to be adapting, the Amazing Spider-Mans. Then if you want to look at the Ultimate comic books, they didn't get that right either. They didn't get that right either. Number 3, inferior to the Sam Raimi trilogy and a reboot and a 10-year plus reboot of a successful franchise, not a critically panned franchise like the Joel Schumacher Batmans. No, these idiots Sony had the audacity to try a 10 plus reboot of Spider-Man separate from the MCU, going up against the Avengers 2012, and they expected not to fail. I didn't see the writing on the wall at the time, but even without the Spider-Man's protest, they were destined for failure. You're talking about a reboot, a 10-year plus reboot of a successful franchise, with the last one just being 5 years prior to the Amazing Spider-Man 2012, and that was Spider-Man 3. A reboot of a successful franchise. Not only a reboot of a successful franchise, but no MCU involvement, and more importantly, going up against the badass Avengers 2012 and The Dark Knight Rises. And to this day, you idiots are shocked this movie failed. But I tell you the truth, I didn't even see the writing on the wall back then, because I wish I would have known. If we could stop the Amazing Spider-Mans and bring them back home to Marvel, like you guys technically did with Dragon Ball Evolution, I would have protested the first one. I alone decided not to watch it and tried to convince one person unsuccessfully not to watch it. But if I had known that we could take this franchise and bring it back home, that's my favorite thing. And once again, thank you everyone who made that possible. I will never stop thanking you guys. Number 4, terrible storyline, script, acting, and special effects. So if you try to come up here with that, it doesn't have to follow the comics, and true, but you gotta have something better than Lizardman trying to turn everyone else into Lizardmen in what is supposed to be a super serious Spider-Man film. Electro getting mad at Spider-Man because Spider-Man technically stole the spotlight from him. What else? The worst. The Osborns dying from a hereditary disease, and magic blood being the cure to save Harry. Before you try to say that's from the comic books, that is not from any comics. That is a ripoff and a rehash of Star Trek Into Darkness. And then terrible special effects. Look like the GameCube era of special effects. Then terrible acting. You don't need a comic expert to see how terrible the acting was. Repeating the same stuff. I break up with you. That's the question. Stuff like that. Just other terrible other dialogue. So yeah. Number five. Continuing from the terrible acting. Andrew Garfield and the characters suck. Mainly Andrew Garfield, Gwen Stacy, and Harry Osborn, who's probably the worst character in this franchise. In one of our last debates about this crappy franchise, XAM, you had the audacity to try to say they after I proved that they didn't capture Gwen Stacy's character and they didn't get her backstory right. You had the audacity to say, well, at least they got her character right. No, they didn't. This Gwen Stacy was a useless, overpowered Mari Sue. She was smart and was more of a hero than Spider-Man, and was helping out in the witches they did, despite all of this girl power, all of this effort to try to make Gwen Stacy more involved, more useful. They created an even more useless character. Her only purpose here was to be the girlfriend of Peter Parker, then die and set up the next lead. Gwen Stacy in the comic books was not a hero like Spider-Man, but she had her own life and her own problems and yeah, there's more, but yeah. So yeah, get the fuck out of here with that. And Andrew Garfield, just a cocky show off hipster bitch. Edward Cullen, Batman, Batman Begins, Christian Bale, Bruce Wayne wannabe with elements of Robert Downey Jr. Without, however, he doesn't have the charm or charisma as any of those actors, especially Robert Downey Jr. had. I was one of the first people to bring up the whole Edward Cullen Twilight comparisons. Now everyone who bashes these films says that. Six. Oh yes, one of the most offensive things. Fan service and fan bait from the comic books and source material in the trailers as in a desperate attempt to get people like me and dumbasses like you and the rest who went to this film into theaters. And those fan service, Easter eggs, and fan bait do nothing to set up do nothing for these storylines. They're only there to set up future movies. Oh, which look, they're not gonna happen now. 7. You guys weren't fair with DBE and Green Lantern. So once again, I'm not fair with Spider-Man. And you try to call us morons and arrogant. I think I don't remember your exact words because your original account when you posted this on your XAM 10,000 I think account. Your XAM 10,000 account is gone. But if I'm an arrogant dumbass and for not liking you're not only a dumbass sheep, you're a hypocrite. And you're an easily entertained moron who knows nothing about the Amazing Spider-Man, who knows nothing about the Spider-Man comic books, because I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. If you knew what Spider-Man was about, if you grew up with the comic books, and I mean the originals, not that New Age Ultimate garbage, but they didn't get that one right either. But if you knew the originals, you would have been nowhere near this movie. You damn sure would not have lied and tried to say it was good and tried to force it on us. Movie was trash. Not even a Spider-Man fan, and I was offended by the lack of effort. The lack of effort. Just threw something together to keep the rights instead of defaulting back to Marvel. As soon as Sam Raimi was done, Sony, you were done. So yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. So nothing left to do now except victory dance.